Before we're going to start, I just want to, this year was sponsored for Refuah Shalema of Lilach Bat Geula and Frida Bas Rina, and all the learning that takes place in this space medrash is the Refuah Shalema of Chaim ben Shoshana. There are two things that we can learn about from a history shiur about a gadol. The first thing that we can learn from a history shiur about a gadol is who this gadol was, who this rabbi was, what did he do, his accomplishments, his significance to the Jewish nation. And the second thing is that we can learn from things that he has done in his lifetime and try to apply it to our own lives. He's done many good things. Sometimes we can apply it to ourselves. That's what we're going to try to focus on this year. 3 months ago, Klal Yisrael suffered a terrible loss. It was the passing of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. More than 850,000 people attended his funeral in Jerusalem. And people came from all over. There were Sephardim there were Ashkenazic people, there were Hasidim, there were Dati Leumi, there were religious people, not religious people, politicians. Everybody, people from the north, there were lots of people there. Everybody put their differences aside and came with one intention, one thing on their mind, to pay their last respects to Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. Who was Rabbi Ovadia Yosef that he was able to get such a big funeral, which some people would like to say this is the biggest and largest funeral since the times of Moshe Rabbeinu? Rabbi Ovadia Yosef was born on September 24th, 1920 in Baghdad. His parents, Yaakov and Georgia Ovadia. Their last name was Ovadia. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef later on in his life changed his last name to his middle name, which was Yosef. They called him Ovadia Yosef after two prominent rabbis that lived in Iraq. Rabbi Abdallah Somech, Ovadia, is the servant of God. Abdallah in Arabic is Abad Allah, is the servant of God. And Yosef after the great Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Yosef Chaim. Already as a kid, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef was known to be showing signs of greatness. His love and passion for Torah studying was already from when he was a young child. And it was known, his rabbis and his Rosh Yeshivas already paid attention to that from when he was already very young. When he was a teenager, he was studying in the Yeshiva Kurat Yosef. And his father, they were a poor family. His father owned a grocery store. He was a fine religious man, and he would go to study Torah in the morning. But he needed somebody to take him over. And once his son reached a nice age, he was able to handle the store alone, he decided he's going to ask Ovadia Yosef, can you help me in the morning? Ovadia Yosef was reluctant, but he had to honor his father's request. What is he going to do? He prefers to stay in yeshiva and study, but his father asked him what he's going to do. One morning, Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Ovadia's father, comes and he sees the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Ezra Atiyah. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Yeshiva Prat Yosef in the old city. And he finds him standing in the store behind the register. He turns white. He says, Rabbi, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in the yeshiva teaching hundreds of students. What are you doing here? So the Rosh Yeshiva smiled and he said to him, you know, your son Ovadia, he's going to be a great leader. He's going to be a big Talmud Chacham. And therefore, he has to continue studying. And I'm an old man. I can't change the next generation. I can't affect it, so I will help you. I'll take a few hours and I'll help you. It's crazy. Of course, Rabbi Ovadia's father apologized. He said he'll never disturb his son's learning. A similar story was with the Mir Rosh Yeshiva, the previous Mir Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel. Nosson Tzvi Finkel lived in America, but he studied by his uncle, Rav Lezer Yehuda, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir at the time. So when he wanted to go back to America. He lived in Chicago. So he asks the Rosh Yeshiva for permission, can I go back home after a few years? So he said, yeah, you can go back home. I can't tell you no. He calls a taxi, gets into the taxi, the Yeshiva tells him goodbye, his uncle says, safe trip. Yeshiva gets under the car. The taxi can't drive. He gets under the car. So he comes out, Uncle Rosh Yeshiva, what are you doing? I need to go. I'm going to miss the flight. He said, I can't tell you not to go home, but I can stop you from going. Why? Why did these two Rosh Yeshivas do these for these two young students? Because they saw greatness in them. They saw what they're going to do. Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel was a Rosh Yeshiva of thousands of Talmidim in the Mir. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef also was the Rebbe, and he was the Rebbe of pretty much every Sephardic Jew in Israel. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef was known to have a phenomenal memory, a photographic memory. He would look at a page, glance at it, study it, of course. He would review many times, but still he had a photographic memory. When he was 16, he had studied the Talmud many times, so he decided he's going to write himself a kuntras called Kuntras Yebia Omer, and that was a pamphlet, like a little booklet with the rules of studying the Talmud, what he has picked up from studying it so many times. So he writes down, there's one specific word that comes throughout the Talmud. It says Va'atanya. That is normally a question. Va'atanya is a question. However, sometimes the commentaries, Rashi or Tosfos, they'll point out Va'atanya is a statement this time. This time you should read it as a statement. So Rabbi Ovadia quoted and pointed out every single time in this rule book, in this rule, every single time in the entire Talmud, by heart, where Va'atanya is a statement. I got to know it. It's got to be pointed out. There were no computers, there were no search engines. Because Rabbi Ovadia had such a unbelievable memory, one time in Egypt, in Purat Yosef, they received a massive shipment of books that came from Egypt to the yeshiva. So they went through them, labeled them, put them aside, put them on their shelves. There were 3 boxes that were just papers. Of course there were books, but they had no page number, there was no title, nobody knew where these books belonged. There was just a bunch of piles of paper, 3 boxes. What are they going to do? They decided they're going to wait for Rabbi Ovadia Yosef to come. He will surely help them. So Rabbi Ovadia Yosef came. He said, Rabbi, can you help us? He has a seat, takes a look at the page. He says, this page 48 from this book. Puts it down. They write it down, and he did that for 2 boxes out of 3. The 3rd box, he said, I never seen these books. Great memory. I'm not sure if anybody knows this, but in the Kollel we say the shiur over. We want to make sure that we're well prepared, so we say the shiur over to 2 or 3 other members from the Kollel. So, by the way, there are 3 people from the Kollel. They all know what I'm going to say already, and still sitting here, and
still laughing at the jokes.
and
Gave applause card.
And one of them asked me when I said over these stories about memory. He said, Chaim, what can we learn from a person who's a genius? How does that apply to me? I told him, you stopped me at the right place, because the next 2 stories will teach us what does memory apply to us. How does a person being a genius help us? In 2006, Rabbi Ovadia had undergone open heart surgery, and when he woke up from his anesthesia, he asked for his Talmud right away. And he continued from where he left off right before the anesthesia kicked in. First of all, that's just amazing how he was able to pay attention when he fell asleep. His son, Rabbi David Yosef, came into his room to see how he was doing. How do you check how Rabbi Ovadia was doing? You ask him a question. He said a quote. He said a certain quote, and he asked him, Father, where's this quote said? So he says, in the Chidah, in Sefer Yair Ozen, this page and this chapter. Wow, unbelievable. He still remembers. Father, how long ago did you see this? 43 years ago. Oh, wow. Father, you're almost there. One more question. What did you have for lunch today? I don't remember. What do you mean? What do you mean you don't remember? That doesn't make any sense. You're a genius. A photographic memory. You should know what you ate at least. They say that he used to wake up in the middle of the night to write down notes that he wanted to have. He would get up and he would be feeling around for the light switch, not knowing where the light switch was. He didn't know where it was. It was his own house, his own study. Somebody every single time would have to turn on the switch and tell him, here, this is the light switch. He never remembered where it was. It wasn't important. Every person is given a talent. Every person is a genius in his own way. Every person has a talent. If we would be selective hearing, anybody heard of selective hearing? Of course. Rabbi Ovadia showed us there's such a thing as selective memory. You choose what to remember. He chose to remember Torah. We can also choose to remember things or to get excited about different things. We should try to do that for the better. Ovadia never wasted a moment. He was studying Torah constantly. He never picked his head up from the book. His friend, Rabbi Chaim Ariel Naftali, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Bridgeport Kollel, he was a good friend, really good friend. They grew up together. They lived in the same building at a certain point in their lives. He says that one time they had to go on a plane trip, him and Rabbi Ovadia Yosef and a few other rabbis. They go, it was the first time they were all on a plane. Naturally, if I was going to go on a plane, anybody went on a plane the first time, you're going to look, see the seats. Now we have the DVD, so we want to adjust it, figure it out, how it works. They didn't have it then, but you want to look out the window. You want to see the takeoff, landing. Ovadia Yosef asked to be, where's my seat? Sat down, pulled out a pocket Gemara, small Talmud, started studying, didn't lift his eyes out. Rabbi Ben Sion Abishal witnessed this with all the other rabbim, and they said, he hasn't picked his eyes up from the book until he landed, and they told him, Rabbi, we got to get off. He said, we also studied. Of course, there were big rabbis. He said, we studied also on a plane, but he made us feel so little, because we took a look around, we wanted to see, it's Geshmak, let's see what's going on over here. Ovadia didn't pick his eyes up, he said, we felt little. Rabbi Eli Mansour, if anybody heard of him, he's a Syrian rabbi from Flatbush, from Brooklyn, a great speaker. When he was eulogizing Rabbi Ovadia, he said a story that happened with him. He said, happened a few times that I was I'm talking to Rabbi Eli Mansour's thing, he was the translator for Rabbi Ovadia when he had to deal with people in English. So Rabbi Ovadia would say what he had to say, and he says, Rabbi Eli Mansour says, Rabbi Ovadia didn't have to hear what I have to say to the next person because he knows what he said. And he doesn't understand what the person is responding. So during those few minutes, you saw his lips were moving. He was saying Mishnayos. Studying Mishnayos. We're studying them by heart. He didn't waste a second. It just was too... One time, when he was a little younger, he was married, but he used to study in a yeshiva, in a base medrash on his block on Fridays. He would get up, daven nates, vasikin, and afterwards he studied the entire day in the base medrash. His wife would bring him food to eat. He's hungry. He's a man. He has to eat. The shamish would bring back the food, the plate, the empty plate back to the rabbis, and so she shouldn't have to go out for a second trip to the base medrash. She had kids. They had 11 children. So every single time you notice the plate was wiped clean. There's nothing left. So he tells the Rebbitzin, you should probably put some more food. Your husband's hungry. The rabbi needs strength. She said, what are you talking about? I know my husband. I have to beg him to eat. You have to wait. There's no way he's eating. He's like, he said that you have to, he needs more food, so he puts more food. The next Friday, he puts more food, and he asked the Rebbitzin, did you put more food? Because the plate was wiped out. What happened? I have no idea. So he decided he's going to hide. He went into the bima. He gets inside the bima, and he hid. He waited. The Rebbitzin brought the food, and the Rebbitzin left, and a few minutes later, a couple of cats walked in. Jumped onto the table, ate the food, licked the plate clean, the rabbi was like this to the book, didn't know anything, didn't budge, didn't even twitch. Didn't disturb him, I don't understand how, I have no idea. But the rabbi has never known, he never knew his wife even brought him food, he was engrossed, a moment to lift his eyes up from the book. It's too much for the rabbi. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef had a library in his house, a Sfarim library, of over 30,000 books. Over 30,000 books. He knew them all by heart. He knew where they all were. And one time they wanted to readjust his library. They said, are you going to be able to put them all back exactly where they are? Because if not, then it's going to waste my time until I have to find them, because I know exactly where every single book is. He had a ladder. He was a short man, and because the library went all the way up to the ceiling, so he needed a ladder. One time in the middle of studying, he gets up onto the ladder, and he opens up the book. He didn't want to waste time. He gets onto the ladder, starts reading the book. And the book right there. For 5 hours he was there. His son, who was saying over the story, says, all of a sudden we heard, boom! Everybody runs to the rabbi study. See, Chaim Ariel Yosef is laying on the floor motionless. He said, we thought we lost him. That was it. They come to check to see, they wanted to see what happened, and they see that he was still alive. He was trying to move, but he was in a lot of pain. They take him, give him some medical attention. He broke his foot. They asked him, Father, what happened? Tell us what happened. You fell. People don't just fall. He said, I got onto the ladder, and I was studying. When I closed the book, I forgot I was on the ladder. I didn't realize I was on the ladder, so I just started walking back to my desk, and I fell off the ladder. He was so engrossed. He couldn't 1 second to waste. He didn't even have the time to realize he's on a ladder. Rabbi Yashiv came to visit him. He was a sick man. He broke his leg. Came to visit him. He was there with his son-in-law, Rabbi Zilberstein, from Bridgeport. He spent the whole hour speaking with him. They spoke in Torah. He asked him how he's feeling. When they left, his son-in-law asked him, Rabbi Yashiv, this is not like you. It's not like you. You don't give people more than just a few minutes, 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there, but you don't give people an hour? What's going on here? So it says in the Torah, Adam ki yamus ba'al. A person, Rashi explains, a person who will kill himself in all Lashon Torah. In the base medrash, a person who will just do anything for Torah. He said there's one person in this generation who did such a thing, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. So he said, of course I have to honor him. I have to give him more time. So that's why he gave him an hour. Such appreciation. All the rabbis, everybody, Ashkenazim, Sephardim, everybody appreciated the Chacham. Of course, if it would only even take, I don't know if we can do that for 5 hours, but even 10 minutes, we'll leave our cell phone out of our base medrash, we'll turn it off, we're just going to focus on Torah. Those 10 minutes will be so much. They can take us so far. Besides for Rabbi Ovadia's own personal study, he had 2 other big goals that were publicly known that he did. In the 40s and the 50s, there were very few Sephardic yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael and throughout the world. And needless to say, there were very few classes given to the working people on Torah. There were no shiurim on Torah. Today, in every base medrash, every city, there's always shiurim, there's nothing. So Bavadi started going, he gave a shiur, there were 4 people, there was 5 people in that shul. On Shabbos, he would give 7 shiurim in 7 different shuls. He would walk to 7 different places and give shiurim to Balavat, and people were working, they needed to know some Torah. People said, Rabbi Ovadia, you're a genius, you're a fascinating Talmid Chacham, you're unbelievable. What are you doing? You're talking to people who won't even understand the little bit about you. You won't get half the things that you're saying, so many quotes, so many rabbis. Just go to yeshiva, give a high shiur, everybody will grow from that. He says, you're not understanding. Because when I am going to the working people and teaching them Torah, they're going to want their children, they're going to love the Torah, they're going to want their children to study Torah. They're going to want their children to study Torah. And he also would go and he would talk to children. And he would go to the 8th grade when they would graduating class, and he would tell them continue studying Torah. Why? Because he knew that if he's going to tell the parents to teach the parents Torah, they're going to love Torah. They're going to send their children to schools. He would go and convince the kids, because he knew that if the kids will go study Torah and a child will tell his mother, I learned that on Erev Shabbos the mother lights candles. What type of mother will not light candles on a Friday night after she hears that from a child? She's going to tell him, no, we don't do that. What do you mean? Your son studied them. And so he was able to be mekar both the parents and the children. And he was very, very successful. Anybody who saw in the introduction to Alichot Olam that we had here, copies of them, he said that this was in the 80s. They had already 30,000 boys and girls already were in Talmudic Torah institutions, and they're already studying Torah. Besides for thousands of bachrim and yeshivas and guys in kollel, thousands of. He was so accomplished. He accomplished so much by giving these shiurim around Israel. He had another goal, and his goal was to bring back the Sephardic halacha rulings to its old ways. What I mean, there was the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch was about 600 years ago, and also in the sheets that we learned today, we saw that he shows how there were hundreds of rabbis, Sephardi rabbis from all the different Sephardi communities that accepted Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, the Shulchan Aruch. They accepted the Shulchan Aruch as the only ruling. We're going to follow the Shulchan Aruch, and that's it. The Sephardi people accepted the Shulchan Aruch like that. And after in the mid 1700s and 1800s, the Kabbalic rabbis started growing more, and they started paskening halachas more Kabbalic style, a little different than the Shulchan Aruch, and it made it a lot more difficult for the simple Jew to be able to keep them, because they're a little bit more, they're more chumradik, they're a little bit more chamer, and therefore a lot of students went and they started studying Ashkenazic ruling. So there was Kabbalah, there was Ashkenazi, and there were Sephardim. We had to keep, there was, the rabbis all accepted on themselves that all Sephardim will follow the Shulchan Aruch. So therefore, he started teaching a lot of the Shulchan Aruch, and then he said shiurim at the age of 18, and he used to, on the Ben Ish Chai, and he would say how he felt was the halacha based on the Shulchan Aruch, and that was what he later on published the book, 8 volumes of Alichot Olam. After the Yom Kippur War, there were about 900 women who lost their husbands in the war and they didn't know their whereabouts. They assumed they were dead. They didn't come back. Nobody heard of them, but they didn't know. And according to Torah law, we have to, in a guna, a woman who doesn't know where her husband is can't remarry. However, she needs a little bit of a proof, something to show that that her husband was dead, passed away, and then she'll be able to remarry. So, no rabbi wanted to take that burden of dealing with all these 900 women and try to be matir aguna. But Ovadia said, I'm going to do it. And one by one, every single woman, he listened to her. He said, just give me the slightest amount of proof, the littlest, something so I can tell you that you could go remarry. He felt so bad for them. When his son, Rabbi Yosef, became chief rabbi, so just a few months ago, so I heard this on a video. I watched the video as he was telling his son. He said, you know what your job is? Your job is to be matir aguna. If there's an aguna comes to you, she's in a lot of pain. And he was almost crying, telling this to his son. She's in a lot of pain. You know what you have to do? He said, you see this library? You know why Hashem gave us such a big library? Because he said, you are going to go and turn it and not leave one page unturned until you find this lady a reason that she can remarry. Because she's in pain. He felt for every single Jew. 3 months before he passed away, he had to go to the hospital, something that was very, very serious, a serious matter. And they came to take him and he said, I can't go. He said, what do you mean? He said, it's a dangerous situation. They don't know if I'm going to make it out, right? They don't know if I'm going to come back from the hospital. It's a serious surgery. So he said, yeah, so that's the reason why we got to hurry up. What are you doing? He said, there's an aguna, there's a lady who doesn't know where her husband is, and I'm in the middle of writing her a response in order to tell her that she can remarry. But if I don't come back, who's going to do that? Who's going to worry about these women? And therefore, I have to write this. So he cared so much. But the newspapers, the non-religious people in Israel, they decided there's no way. This is back in the times of the Yom Kippur War. There's no way that all 900 women have such an excuse they can remarry. The rabbi, it's a joke. So one reporter, a lady, decided she's going to play a trick on Rabbi Ovadia. She started interviewing a bunch of women, getting their story. What did you show him? What did you prove to him? Was it a picture? Was the dog tag? Everybody, how did you prove that your husband was dead? She got a good picture. She made up a good story. She came in crying to the rabbi, Rabbi, my husband, he died in the war, and I don't know where he is, I want to remarry. So Ovadia listened to her story, what's your proof? Listen to her, cares so much for her. And he said, okay, you can remarry. He started writing her a permission and signed it, you can remarry, handed it to her. She was thrilled, she was so happy. Why? Her husband was alive and he was actually in the newspaper room waiting for her to call to say, you know, we got to Ovadia. That's it, we got him. That's it. It's false. There's no way he was matir so many women. She runs, there was no cell phone, so she runs to a payphone. She makes a call. The guy on the other line was crying. He was crying, he was bawling. She said, what's going on? We should be celebrating. He said, your husband, on his way down to the office over here, got into a car accident and died instantly. It was about 10 minutes ago. It was about the same time Rabbi Ovadia handed her this letter. You know why? Because a person who loves every single Jew so much, God's going to protect him. Hashem's going to protect him. Hashem loves a person who loves every single Jew. We have to also, a person is in pain, we have to reach out to a person. We can say maybe it doesn't have to be to that extent, maybe we can't. But we can learn from Ovadia how much he went out for women, for thousands of women like that. Ovadia served as the Sephardic chief rabbi from 1973 to 1983. One time when he was right when he became that she was appointed chief rabbi, they gave him a grant to go on vacation. This next part of the shiur is going to be the vacation part of Rabbi Ovadia. We're going to talk take a few minutes to understand the vacations. He had a few vacations. So Ovadia, all his kids, they decided, they convinced him, Father, we got to go on a vacation, let's go. So they all, a few cars, there were 3 cars, they had 11 children, some of them might have been married already. Everybody goes to Tveria, to the hotel. They unpack, they start davening mincha. After mincha, Ovadia said, I'm going back home. Take me home, let's go, come on. I'm going home, everybody can stay, I got to go home. They said, what do you mean, we just got here, we have another week. So he said, my book library, can anybody bring it for me? Because I can't be a big party for my books. That was his one and only vacation. Trip to Tveria and back. He couldn't waste time, he couldn't leave the books. He had to study Torah all the time. He had 5 sons, he had 6 daughters. All his sons followed his ways, and they were all rabbis. Rabbi Chaim Ariel Yosef was his oldest. He passed away in the beginning of either the end of 2012 or the beginning of 2013, right before Ovadia's nifter, about a year. He was a big rabbi. He took his father over in shiurim in BiRushalayim at the age of 21 already. He was already giving shiurim. His father went to Tel Aviv. He was the chief rabbi. He was already giving shiurim. He didn't necessarily follow his halachic rulings. He had his own way of paskening. But nonetheless, he was a big Talmid Chacham. His son, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, is the chief rabbi of Chulon. He gives shiurim on the radio, answers the questions. You can ask him any question you want on the radio. People call him up. His most famous son, Rabbi Yosef, he's the current chief rabbi in Israel, Sephardic chief rabbi. He wrote 44 books himself, called Yalkut Yosef. That's why he's so famous. Everybody has his book. Almost every Sephardi family has his book. We have some of them in here in Yeshiva. His father was zeicha to see him become the chief rabbi. Rabbi Yitzchak said, and with this we're going to end, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef said that the night before Rabbi Ovadia Yosef passed away, he said, before I have one more last story. Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef came to America about 6 years ago, and he stayed by my brother-in-law's house. And the person who accompanied him was a rabbi. I know him personally. I studied in Bnei Brak. I got to know him. He told my brother-in-law at the time, he says, the rabbi, since Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, since he got onto the plane, he was studying the entire plane ride. They landed in JFK. They went to Queens to daven Shacharis. They asked him to say a shiur. He wasn't prepared. He said a shiur. In the car, he said, my brother-in-law went to pick him up. He just said Shalom Aleichem, opened up a book, started studying the entire car ride to Monsey, from Queens to Monsey. He went inside. He had a small breakfast for 15 minutes. Ate breakfast and was in his room until they knocked on his door, told him to go daven. I was there when we ate the meal. The entire time during the Friday night meal, he was talking Torah or saying stories about his father. And then he said 2 shiurim, one at the end of the meal, and then a few people came and he said another shiur. Each one was an hour long. I was there for both of them. And afterwards, it was a winter night. Afterwards, he went to sleep at 1 o'clock in the morning, and this is since he left Israel. I don't know how many hours it is. I didn't do the math. So my brother-in-law took him a few guts. It took him the guts. After a few days, he felt a little more comfortable. He asks him, "Can you tell me what's the difference between you and your father?" So he was shocked. He's like, "What, me, my father? What are you talking about?" But he said, "I'll tell you one difference." He said, "My father, if you would tell him when he's finished, when he gets up from his studying, you would tell him that he's in America, he'll believe you. Because when he's studying, he's involved in Torah. He doesn't care. Doesn't care what happens. A bomb can land. You could tell him he's in America, you would fool him. Me, I know where I am at every moment that I'm learning. I'll get distracted from a little this, a little that, a fly. He'll get distracted from it." He said that's a difference. That's a big difference. So Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef said, and during the Shloshim, he said, you know what my father's final words were? He was unconscious for a few weeks, back and forth. He was waking up and this, and they were trying to revive him. His final words the night before he passed away, he told all his children. We were all there in the room with him. He said, "I have no energy anymore. If I'm alive but I can't study Torah, I have no energy anymore." He said, "Katzti b'chayai, I'm fed up with my life if I can't study Torah." That was who Rabbi Ovadia was. May his merit be a meritz yoshel on our behalf. I hope everybody enjoyed the shiur. 2 announcements.
כן תכוננו אבינו הרחמן המרחם